Sechas Nazir Daf Tes Zayin begins the third parak of the Masechta, begins with a Mishnah and contains one additional Mishnah, discussing what happens at the end of the period of Nazirus and at the beginning of the period of Nazirus. The first Mishnah will have two primary cases. One is, when can you do the haircutting and the ending closing procedures to end a Nazirus, and what happens if it is done too early. And it'll also discuss what happens if Tumah happens on the last day. So we'll be talking about the last day from a proper perspective and from a Tumah perspective. And we're going to talk about these halachos in light of how the Nazirus was formulated when it was made. Was it made stam without a specific number? Was it made with a number specifying 30 days? Or was it made with a number specifying 100 days? We'll also see a machlokes between the Chachamim, that is the Tanna Kama, and Rabbi Elazar on these discussions. Now, most of this Mishnah has already been discussed previous in the Masechta on Daf Hey and on Daf Vav. So let's begin the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says that, as we know, there is a procedure to close the period of Nazirus. There are three karbonos that are brought: an ola, a chatas, and a shlamim, and the hair is cut. Now, this is supposed to l'chatchila take place after the Nazirus ends. So the Mishnah discusses what is the right day for this to happen. So if the Nazirus was made stam, without specifying a time limit, so then it is assumed to be 30 days. So the proper time for this to happen is on day 31. If it is not done on day 31, it is done on day 30. So the Mishnah paskins that it is okay b'di'eved, it works b'di'eved, because day 30 counts as mixas yom kekulo, part of the day counts as the full day, and therefore the Nazirus has really ended by when part of day 30 has already taken place. Now, that's only b'di'eved because in B'dirabbanan we want to have a full day 30, so we don't confuse it with the case of where he specified 30 full days. And that is our Mishnah's next case. What happens when he specifies the Nazirus should go for 30 days? There, it has to be on day 31. You cannot do the ending procedures on day 30 because the Nazirus is not over until day 30 ends. Therefore, it has to be day 31. There is no mixas yom kekuloi in that case. Now, what happens if he was makabel two Nazirusin, one after the other? So the Mishnah here rules, and then the Mishnah says that this was testimony about this that was brought by Rav Papius to Karen B'Yavna. The Mishnah rules that the same halachos apply for each one. So lechatchila, if he said a stam Nazirus twice, that is, he has two Nazirus in both 30 days, but without specifying, so you could use mixas yom kekuloi, and one follows the other. So lechatchila, you should end the first one on day 31. You should do the closing procedures on day 31. That also counts as day one of the second Nazirus. And therefore you should end the final Nazirus, the second Nazirus, should end on day 60, because that would be 30 days after the beginning of this Nazirus. Lechatchila should be day 61, which would give a full 30 days plus a day afterwards. Now, b'di'eved, it's okay if it's on day 60, because that allows for mixas yom kekuloi, and of course he said stam Nazirus, so mixas yom kekuloi works here. B'di'eved could even be that the first Nazirus was ended on day 30, and then the second Nazirus could end on day 60. That would be the second Nazirus would be lechatchila, because it would be 31 days, counting day 30 as day 1. Or it could even end on day 59, which would be 30 days for the first Nazirus, and then 30 days for the second Nazirus, with day 30 counting as both the last day of the first and the first day of the second. Now the Mishnah goes on to what happens if he becomes tamei on the last day. Now generally the halacha is that if a person becomes tamei in the middle of his Nazirus, he has to bring a chatas ha'oif, a chatas ha'oif, an olas ha'oif, and a shlamim behema, and then he has to do his entire Nazirus over again. But that's only if he becomes tamei during the Nazirus. What happens if the Nazirus has ended and now he just hasn't brought the carbon yet? So that's the case of our machlokes here. And we have the following halachas, and here we have a machlokes. So if he was makabel a stam Nazirus, according to the Tanna Kama, if he became tamei on day 30, even though you would have said Mixasayim Kukuloi, but it's still considered to be in the period of Nazirus, and the entire Nazirus falls, and he has to do it all over again. According to Rebbe Lazar, since you said Mixasayim Kukuloi, you don't have to do it over again. However, he can't bring the Karbanis now, and therefore he has to wait until he becomes Tahar from the Tumas Mace, which would take 7 days, and therefore he really has to end up practically extending his Nazirus for another 7 days because he has to keep it. He cannot end it until the Karbanis and the haircut are brought. Now, what happens if he specified 30 full days? So here you have no Mixasayim Kikuloi, so that Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar both agree that you have to do the 30 days over again because the Nazirus has not ended, it became tummy in the middle. Now what if he set up a Nazirus for 100 days? So the Tanakama says if he became tummy on the last day, no Mixasayim Kikuloi, you have to do all 100 days over again. Here Rabbi Eliezer says he has to do 30 days over again. And the Gemara explains that that's a Gzeres HaKasav, even though you should have said Mixasayim Kikuloi, and it's over, you have to go back and do another 30 days. Gzeres HaKasav, the Gemara learns on Daf Vav those halachos. Now, if he says 100 days and becomes Tamei on day 101, so according to the Tanakama, he has to do 30 days over again, and that's again a Gzera Derabanan Atu, a case where it was a 30-day long Nazirus, and he has to do the 30 days over again, so here we also make a Gzera that he has to do 30 days over again. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer, he doesn't have to do anything over again because he's completed it. He's on day 101. He doesn't hold of it Gzera Derabanan. He does, however, say that he can't do the Karbanos yet because he is Tamei, and therefore he has to wait 7 days. Alright, now the Gemara now begins. The Gemara explains the 3 opinions of Rabbi Eliezer as we have explained it. The Gemara explains that when he made a Stam Nazirus and becomes Tamei on day 30, he only has to do 7 days. He only has to add 7 days. He doesn't have to do anything over again because Mixasayim Kikuloi. However, if he said 30 full days, then the Gemara explains he has to do them over again because he hasn't finished yet. And if he said 100 days, you have the Gzeres HaKasav. The Gemara says, as this was explained earlier, Machlokas Bar Pada and Rav Masna on Daf Hey, Amud Beis through Daf Vav, discussing how those halachas play out according to each opinion. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses what happens if a person is in a Beis HaKvaros, that is, he's Tamei Meis, at the time that he's Mekabel Nazirus upon himself. So, of course, the halach is that the Nazirus can't start as long as he is Tamei. There is no status of beginning of Nazirus. So the Mishnah says is that if he remains in his state of Tumah, that is, he remains in the Beis HaKvaros, or he's not Metaher, the entire 30-day period that his Nazirus should be, he does not bring a carbon tumah. He does not do any of the procedures of somebody who was a Nazir and became Tamei. Because in order for that to happen, he has to be a Nazir and then become Tamei. This person never had his Nazirus begin because he was Betumah the entire time. And therefore, we're still waiting for him to become Tahar until it begins. There is no Tamei Nazir procedure. Now, how long does he have to be Tahar and have Nazirus begin in order to have the procedure fall on him if he becomes Tamei? So that's a machlokas. The Tanakama says, if he goes out and he's a Metaher himself, on day 7 of his Tahara, Mixasayim Kikuloi, he's already considered to be Tahar, and therefore his Nazirus begins on that day, that is day 7 of his Tahara process. If he becomes Tamei again on that same day, his Nazirus has begun and had Tumah Chal on it, and therefore he has the whole Tumah procedure begin. He has to bring the 3 Karbanos plus the haircut. However, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says no, it has to be at least 2 days. So it would have to be that the Tumah is only Chal on him the next day. That way he has the 7th day of his Tahara process, Mixasayim counts as day 1. The next day, Mixasayim counts as day 2. And then, if he becomes Tamei, he has to bring the procedure. However, if he becomes Tamei on Yom HaShvi of his Tahara, then it's not Chal, it's not considered like he became Tamei as a Nazir, and he doesn't have to do the entire procedure. The reason for this is because the Torah says, V'hayamim harishanim yiplu. The first days are cancelled. Rabbi Eliezer learns from that you can only have this procedure if there are multiple days of Nazirus. Therefore, you have to have a minimum of 2. We now begin the Gemara, which introduces a machlokas of Yochanan and Rish Lakish. What happens if a person makes a vow of Nazirus while he is Tamei? So Yochanan says the Nazirus is Chal on him, and he is now obligated to run out of his Tumah as fast as he can. If he's in a Beis HaKvaros, to run away. To be Matar as fast as he can. He's violating the Nazirus while he's Tamei. He can't take a haircut, he can't drink wine, and it's Chal on him as soon as he becomes Tar automatically. Rish Lakish says it's not Chal on him. it's meaningless, and he has to. Although he has a mitzvah to go be matar as fast as he can, he has to be makabel naziris again in order for it to be chal. What he said while he was tamei is not worth anything. The Gemara now has 3 kashas on Rish Lakish. The Gemara's first kasha is from our Mishnah. The Mishnah says if somebody makes a naziris while he is in a basic forest, meaning while he is tamei, even if he's there for 30 days, it doesn't count as part of his naziris, and he doesn't have to bring a carbon for his becoming tamei. Implication is he doesn't have to bring a carbon. However, the naziris is chal on him. So Rish Lakish says no. All it means is say he doesn't have to bring a carbon because there is no tayiras tumma. There is no halachas of tumma. There's no halachas of carbon because he's not a nazir. Okay. Second kasha says in a brayso that somebody who is tamei and he makes a vow of naziris is forbidden to take a haircut and to drink wine and to become tamei mace. And if he does take a haircut and he does drink wine and he does become tamei mace, he gets malchus. So if it's not chal on him, as Rish Lakish says, why should he get malchus? He didn't do anything wrong. So Rish Lakish answers, no, we're referring to if he was tamei, then he becomes tahar and he goes back and he's mekabel the naziris upon himself again, then it will be chal on him, and then he'll get malchus if he violates the halachos. Okay, the Gemara's third, final kasha, which is accepted and will reject Rish Lakish's opinion, at least the way we have it now, is a brayso that said there's no difference between a tahar nazir who becomes tamei and a person who was tamei at the time he accepts his naziris, except that a tamei who is mekabel naziris, his 7th day of his tahara counts as day 1 because the naziris is chal on him automatically. However, someone who is a tahar and then becomes tamei, his naziris, the 7th day, does not count as part of his naziris. He has to start his naziris again from the next day. So Gemara asks, according to Rish Lakish, if he was tamei and he was makabel naziris, why should the 7th day count? He has to be makabel naziris again. It should only begin from when he's makabel naziris. It should not be automatic. So Gemara accepts this kasha, and Gemara will revise its understanding of Rish Lakish's opinion on the next step.